This is the scene this morning. Well, it's this afternoon now. It's still freezing underfoot, and it's also misty. Brr. So I thought, let's settle down with a good book. So this question of whether witchcraft, modern witchcraft, is a bit light and fluffy came up recently, and it made me think a little bit. So I went to my trusty The Witch's Bible, or A Witch's Bible rather, by Janet and Stuart Farrar, to just to have a look and see if there was a good answer for that. Of course, this is Wicca. I'm not a Wiccan, but I have a great love and respect for Wicca, and I certainly cut my teeth on it years and years ago now. So let's have a look and see what I found. Oh, it's a very, very old copy. It is falling apart, unfortunately, but here we are. So there was a chapter 11, and it is actually more than one book, this one, so this is probably the second, called The Rationale of Witchcraft. And it's so lovely and it's so beautifully written that I thought I'd read a little bit out from here. So begins, witches are neither fools, escapist, nor superstitious. They are living in the 20th century, well, we're in the 21st now, not the Middle Ages, and they accept the fact without reservation. If they do tend to have a keener sense of historical continuity and a broader time canvas than most people, that makes their awareness of the present more vivid, not less. Many witches are scientists or technicians, and in our experience often very good ones. If modern witchcraft did not have a coherent rationale, such people could only keep going by a kind of deliberate schizophrenia, with neither watertight compartment of their lives particularly happy, and we have seen no signs of that. Modern witchcraft does have a rationale, and a very coherent one. This may surprise some of our readers who know only that witchcraft comes from the gut, and so it does as far as motivation and operation go. The working power and the appeal of the craft do arise from emotions, the intuition, the vasty deep of the collective unconscious. Its gods and goddesses draw their forms from the numinous archetypes, which are the mighty foundation stones of the human racial psyche. I'm moving along a little bit further on in this chapter now. And he goes on to say, I say he because I just have a feeling this was written by Stuart Farrar for some unknown reason. I don't know. I should say they, but I do say he. So they go on to say, the rationale of Wicca is a philosophical framework into which every phenomenon, from chemistry to clairvoyance, from logarithms to love, can be reasonably fitted. And since Wicca is a fast-growing movement, active in a real world, it must, without ever losing or weakening its preoccupation with the psychic depths, constantly explain, examine, develop and improve that philosophy. The rationale of Wicca, as we see it, rests upon two fundamental principles, the theory of levels and the theory of polarity. And I like here how they don't say the law of levels and the law of polarity, because I just like the fact that they're still calling it a theory, which it is, of course. The theory of levels maintains that reality exists and operates on many planes: physical, etheric, astral, mental, spiritual, to give a simplified but generally accepted list. That each of these levels has its own laws, and that these sets of laws, while special to their own levels, are compatible with each other, their mutual resonance governing the interaction between the levels. The theory of polarity maintains that all activity, all manifestation arises from, and is inconceivable without, the interaction of pairs and complementary opposites, positive and negative, light and dark, content and form, male and female, and so on. And this polarity is not a conflict between good and evil, but a creative tension, like that between the positive and negative terminals of an electric battery. Good and evil only arise with the constructive or destructive application of that polarity's output, again, as with the uses to which a battery may be put. He goes on to expand quite in depth about the theories of levels and polarity, but that's far too much for me to read out. So skipping forward a few pages, we're coming towards the end of the chapter. In strict philosophical terms, witches are idealists, for while they believe that every entity or object on the physical plane has its counterparts on the non-material planes, they also believe that there are real entities on the unseen planes which do not have physical forms of their own. To witches, the unseen planes are the fundamental reality, of which material reality is one manifestation. But to label witches as idealists, while correct, is perhaps misleading. Maybe pluralists would be better, for matter is very real to them. They are lovingly rooted in nature, which he refers to as the veil of Isis, vibrant with overtones of all the other levels. Tangible nature is holy to them. That is why their goddess has two main aspects. She is both the Earth Mother, whose fecundity bears and nourishes them during physical incarnation, and the Queen of Night, she in the dust of whose feet are the hosts of heaven, and whose body encircles the universe, whose most vivid symbol is the moon. So skipping forward a little bit more, because we're going into goddess territory here. He has, as I said in the previous passages, gone quite deeply, and it gets a little bit political actually, so I'm going to skip that. So I'm not a fan. But I suppose really one would need to have read that to understand the next bit, but we'll plough on anyway. So, witches see the flaws of the dominant views of the levels and of polarity as follows. So obviously he has highlighted the flaws in materialist thinking in the previous passages. So as follows. 1. The materialists view has a basically sound understanding of the actual working of the theory of polarity, but distorts and impoverishes it by denying the theory of levels. So I think he's talking really about the idea of a very separatist idea of reality, then a very materialistic, separate. Everything is separate from everything else, whereas obviously with witchcraft and Wicca, certainly everything is in union, really. So, and number 2, the monotheistic religious view accepts, in one form or another, the theory of levels, but distorts and impoverishes it by debasing the theory of polarity into a mere conflict between good and evil. And that's lovely, because that ties into what he was saying, or what they were saying, sorry, about the good and evil being a creative, being a product of how that tension in polarities is used. So I think that's really lovely. Pagan polytheistic religions have always accepted both the theory of levels and the theory of polarity without distorting either to fit an inadequate concept or even denial of the other. One has only to study the pantheons of Egypt, Greece, Rome, and India with their creator-destroyer gods and goddesses, their eternal cycles of becoming and ceasing and re-becoming, their dialectical interplay, to realise how richly these attitudes have been symbolised. Wiccan philosophy is in this direct tradition.